Alright everyone, the jig is up. We all know that the cat's out of the bag and has somehow manifested into mid Mario power-ups because, crazy enough, the owner of that same cat, Nintendo, is one of the major figures in modern gaming that has set one of many domino effects of just future unstableness within the whole gaming industry at a high development level. Nintendo specifically with its early adoption of $80 games. Also paid pack-in titles, but luckily that's just filler content, nobody's buying that. It's been generationally damn near indoctrinated within almost all modern players to know that publishers, they're pushing for all their crown jewel development hell filled experience of games to reach these heights that honestly aren't going to be all that possible as far as making these insane blockbuster number sales in the hundreds of millions. And we've learned that either indirectly through all the mass layoffs, the studio shutdowns that the industry has been plagued with, all the games being delayed or outright canceled, that or more directly in your face when you have no choice but to parry it with disgust, with CEOs claiming that fans are unloyal if they don't have the money to buy the shit that they put out. Whichever comes first. And listen, the reason I'm putting all this knowledge in your lap like controllers while you scroll on TikTok in between gaming sessions is because I want to drive home the idea of what gaming is becoming as far as in the mainstream light, with what the majority of players are doing and are honestly getting really tired of, which ultimately it all just boils down to being this big ass F-Zero type race of these publishers trying to rinse as many dollars as possible for longer periods of times out of players to fund these game studios budgets and just recoup the cost that they spent to break even and hopefully someday maybe make a profit if that's even possible. And they do this through all the ways that gamers of today consider what modern gaming is, if you ask them, just based on how much of it that we see in the market at one time, with things like subscriptions where you have access to a majority of games at one time, obviously higher prices of games like we just said, and then there's the rise of just live service based games where you're likely going to be paying as you play the game for extended periods of time. All ideas that ultimately have their fair share of fans, or at least people caught in the genjutsu of doing things like buying sports games every single year. But even though the industry is collapsing in on itself because of its own just sheer greed, another unsung vigilante in the overall downfall of modern gaming trends that players speak of like a mythical beast that once existed but don't have the will to become that player themselves is just people who've been growing in numbers for the longest time and just never cared for any of these insane gaming agendas that publishers are trying to push, and just skipped the whole Wi-Fi setup when they first bought their latest console. The offline gamers, something that we've all likely had our roots in our early start within gaming. I mean, nobody that I remember at elementary school brought a DS that was connected to the internet, since you had to buy the damn browser for that thing. A lifestyle that's considered abnormal by most players today, and that's really because the most huge difference between gaming then and now, when you compare the two different time periods, is because gaming, it used to be a platform focused on the individual, or at least the local co-op gameplay loop, where you didn't need to check into a server thousands of miles away just to access your library of titles. Because now, admittedly, through things like the convenience of just getting your updates from your own home, or even just downloading games and just the distribution route of getting all the latest titles from the comfort of your own home, gaming is almost now solely done through the internet and is focused on the online multiplayer experience instead of the counterpart single player. And as convenient as that can be for us being the players, it is also matched 1,000 times convenient for the publishers themselves to remind you that we don't own shit whenever they can, because they can take away or restrict access to any of these digital titles whenever they want to. And man, some players, these offline bandits of the night, they just aren't having it. They aren't playing ball with these companies and would rather just stick to the old days of gaming, where the console itself would only exist next to the VHS player and DVD player of whatever your TV stand had, collecting dust, and would only get usage when you popped in a title with no connection to the outside world at all, aka just a really simple lifestyle. And it's honestly a peak way to live if you main console gaming, and especially if you consider the things that modern generations have brought to the whole wallet of your console experience, where you need to pay for these subscriptions just to play these online games at all. I mean, look at the PlayStation Plus, the Nintendo Switch Online membership, Xbox Live, if that's even still a thing. All of these are services that console companies use to keep a steady flow of revenue during the generation of the console that they pertain to, and are kept incentivized for players to buy into them through free games, new features like maybe cloud gaming, and obviously access to the multiplayer features. However, being an offline gamer, on the other hand, that just negates the always increasing subscription costs that players are being plagued with, that will always see a drastic amount no matter what you're paying after a year of subscribing to that service. And given the current economic state of the world and how bad it might get in the future, I'm sure that most of our wallets are at 10 HP right now and desperately needs a revive. So I'm sure your wallet will thank you for cutting off this excess money spent. But not buying into any of these main subscriptions that these console companies feel you should have if you buy into these new modern consoles is also indirectly a protest to the whole model of gaming that we're going into right now, because consoles like the Xbox Series X and S, it was reported years ago that these consoles are always sold at a loss, meaning that every console that they sell, they will never make a profit on just solely the console itself, because it costs more to make it than they get in profit. So with that, services like the Xbox Game Pass, which Microsoft has paid literally billions of dollars just to make competitive in the current gaming industry, is one of the factors that offsets some of the loss of profit that they make, since so many people are subscribed to the Xbox Game Pass. But in this equation, if you're the offline gamer, chances are you probably aren't playing every major release out there, or even the majority of games at one time. Maybe you only have like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 games that you'll play in general in like your whole fiscal year, I guess. So in the nature of staying offline, since you do need an internet connection just to access the Xbox Game Pass, the attractiveness of all these different types of games and these subscription services might not be something that moves you to pay for these types of things, which is another reason that it can just be so much more beneficial and easier to be an offline gamer. That and being limited to single player experiences, because online gaming definitely just isn't for everybody. As a wizard who's experienced all timelines, I can conclude that the majority of your gamer rage crash outs have been caused by another player in your lobby. People can just be some hard ass tryhards, not to mention the rise of cheating and how easy it is to do in a lot of online games nowadays, not to mention the connection of other players might be disrupting the whole gameplay flow, to which maybe even if you have a decent connection, someone else might bring the whole session down. It's just so much easier to play at your own pace when you don't have to worry about other players just being in your lobby, or even just existing and feeling like the need to catch up with other players, even if it's like in those sort of MMO experiences. But that doesn't mean you have to be lonely when you play though. If you do want some other players, you can do it just the old-fashioned way and just call up your friends and play local co-op on the couch. Like I said, it's so much more connecting to play with someone who's physically there with you, and you also don't have to worry about just the things that come with online gaming, such as server connection issues, maybe Discord is down for one night so you guys can't talk to each other all like that, or even just dealing with shitty mics that your friend might have. And there are some amazing local co-op games that have came out and are still coming out, with people like Hazelight Studios making their classic games such as the new Split Fiction title, or even It Takes Two, which are some of the best games that players have experienced being in the whole co-op genre. Either way you play games offline, it's just so much easier to turn on your system and boot up a game and not have to worry about things that you can't control, whether that's other players or even just your connection in general with that game that you're playing. That is, however, when the games or consoles allow you to have that type of feeling, because with how prevalent that the internet is within gaming now, game creators have sort of forced your hand as far as needing the internet connection to even access a single player offline experience afterwards, which sounds just backwards as hell, but unfortunately is the reality of most modern offline lifestyles within these newer consoles. Take the PlayStation 5 console, for example. You need internet just to register the console when you first boot it up after you take it out of the box. Like, that's just mandatory to get the console running. Luckily, you won't need it afterwards and can use your console and play your games however you want to, unless there's a PlayStation Network outage, to which if you download any of your games, you can't access it until the online service comes back on. And that's fun. But we all know that the rise of the internet means the rise of advertisements, and these companies with their new consoles, they want to collect as much data as they can, legally speaking, to, track our trends and obviously keep us in the loop of the whole gaming ecosystem that they bring, to which the modern just offline gamer likely hates in this scenario, as they get their freaking 700th Nintendo email of the week. So the newer consoles are likely going to do whatever they can just to keep you at least connected online. But even still, probably the biggest loss when it comes to keeping your console offline, that's something that I can argue we can't live without when it comes to new games especially coming out, is the essential game updates and console firmware updates. Because with the games, almost every title of the 3D era of gaming and up has likely shipped with bugs somewhere down the line, or would just hugely benefit from a day one patch overhaul. So missing out on just what the developers intended the experience of the game to be is obviously a terrible experience that will make you feel like you've wasted money, especially if you don't have access to those game updates. And man, I really can't stress how much that is the case for modern big budget titles. Even if you buy the latest single player $70, excuse my sacrilege, $80 game, there's just no shot that it's going to be perfect and not have some sort of glitches and bugs and maybe even game breaking experiences, because these new games are complex as hell and the development that goes into it, it's never just dead on when the game first ships out. So in that regard, I do think that when it comes to just being a pure offline gamer, it's okay to cheat a little bit as far as just getting your needed updates and registration for your consoles and disk drives and shit, all for the few games that you likely want to play, which when it comes to, the modern single player titles, they do ship in some insane game sizes, with some requiring download straight out of the box. Luckily though, as I'm recording this video, we still are in an age that some games are still coming out physical and with a disc, to which even if the game doesn't fit entirely on one disc and it might need 2 or 3, you can still just download the data straight off of that disc and onto the console, which requires no internet at all, which I have no doubt is a mainstay for the modern offline gamer. However, we kind of are in a serious transition from that, as we reach the new age where just downloading games and just not having them physically is becoming more and more common, to which as physical gaming just gets phased out, online downloads will become more and more of the only option available, which is disgusting to think about, but a harsh reality that players just have to think about if they want to keep their gaming offline in the foreseeable future, which in some cases, I don't know how well that's going to work out. But let's not act like the underground offline gamers are growing in numbers day by day, because that just leaves more wiggle room for the future of gaming to be put back on track for more offline support, because players, they've been protesting some of these new changes that restrict content based on you having internet connections or not. Anytime that I see a new single player game coming out that announces it's requiring internet just to play, there's usually a forum of people underneath that comment section claiming how they hate that decision and hope that the game doesn't need internet at launch. The whole idea of having third-party digital rights management services in games, or DRM, is just disgusting to the modern players, so anytime that's brought into the equation, there's usually outcry. All in all, game sales and player counts usually speak for themselves, because if players just don't want to buy into what a game is offering, whether it's single player or not, especially with these offline gamers, they just won't get into it at all. And as the word spreads and more players just wake up to how internet-based gaming is and how much they don't want it to be, the more this whole chunk of gamers are going to get more considered, and likely more single-player experiences are going to be made in the future, hopefully at least. However, right now though, and for the foreseeable future that I can see based on these trends, if you want to be a purebred, just archetype offline gamer, which I really would think is impossible to do on some 9th gen consoles and up. But I think the most serviceable way to be an offline gamer on the newer hardware is to just use the internet still for things that you will likely need, which is to update your games and for your new console firmware, just to be on the safe side. Obviously, you don't have to use any other service in hell. You don't even need to stay connected to the internet if you don't want to. No matter what, as a whole, I think that offline gaming should always be as respected as it possibly can, because that's how gaming started out, and honestly, that's how gaming should be if you want that option no matter what. And that's all that I got for today, man. If you enjoyed, leave a like on the video, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.